We leave Magna Graecia behind and return to the Ionian coast, to the city of Ephesus, where a thinker of unparalleled intensity awaits us. Heraclitus resembles none of the philosophers we have studied so far. He does not write systematic treatises, but brief, enigmatic, deliberately obscure sentences. He does not seek disciples, but despises the crowd. He does not trust ordinary experience, because men, he says, live as though asleep. Yet beneath that cryptic surface pulses one of the most profound visions of ancient philosophy. There is a universal law, a logos that governs all things, and that law is the unity of opposites. War is the father of all things. Day and night, life and death, hunger and satiety are the same. In this first lesson on Heraclitus we enter the heart of his thought, the logos and the hidden harmony. The question Heraclitus posed in the streets of Ephesus is as unsettling today as it was 25 centuries ago. Is there a universal law that governs the cosmos? And if there is, can that law really be the unity of opposites? How can the same thing be both one and its opposite, alive and dead, day and night, war and peace? Reason tells us that a thing cannot both be and not be at the same time. Heraclitus affirms precisely the contrary. The problem has two faces. The first is logical. If we accept that opposites are the same, are we not surrendering the very possibility of coherent thought? Does not all rational discourse collapse if we affirm that A is not A? The second is metaphysical. If everything is in permanent conflict, if war is the father of all things, why does the cosmos not disintegrate? What holds together that which tends to pull apart? With these questions, Heraclitus broke with the Milesian tradition. Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes had sought a stable material principle, something that abides beneath change. Heraclitus denies that anything stable exists. The principle is not a substance, but a law, a structure, an order that realizes itself precisely through conflict. That principle is the logos. Heraclitus occupies a singular position among the Presocratics. Over 100 verbatim fragments survive from his work, making him one of the best documented. He wrote a book, on nature, but it was no treatise in the Milesian manner. It consisted of brief, enigmatic, deliberately obscure sentences. The ancients nicknamed him the Obscure because his words seemed more like an oracle than a philosophical exposition. Aristotle complained that it was difficult to punctuate his sentences, because one could not tell where each statement began and ended. Alongside the fragments, our main sources are, once again, Aristotle, who discusses Heraclitus's thought in several passages of the Metaphysics and on the Heavens, and the later doxographers. Diogenes Laertius devotes the 9th book of his Lives of the Philosophers to him, a fascinating blend of anecdotes, some of doubtful reliability, and authentic fragments. Hippolytus, in his refutation of all heresies, transmits several important fragments. And Plutarch, in his treatise on the Epsilon at Delphi, offers an interpretation of Heraclitus that has been very influential. Unlike the Milesians or the Pythagoreans, here we do not have to reconstruct a thought from echoes. We have Heraclitus's voice, even if it is a voice that speaks in riddles. Heraclitus lived in Ephesus, one of the great cities of the Ionian coast, in the second half of the 6th century and the opening years of the 5th century before the Common Era. Ephesus was then a city under the rule of the Persian Empire, which had conquered Ionia in 546. It was a crossroads of cultural exchange where Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian traditions converge. In that meeting of worlds, Heraclitus developed a thought unlike that of any other Presocratic. Heraclitus belonged to the aristocracy of Ephesus. According to Diogenes Laertius, he renounced the hereditary title of king-priest in favor of his brother, preferring the solitude of reflection to the exercise of power. His attitude toward his fellow citizens was one of unrelenting contempt. When the Ephesians exiled Hermodorus, the best of their citizens, Heraclitus replied with a phrase that has echoed through the centuries. The Ephesians would do well to hang themselves, every one of them. He deposited his book in the temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, as though his words deserved a place among sacred offerings. Where did his ideas come from? Heraclitus knew the Milesian tradition. He read Thales, Anaximander, Anaximenes. But he subjected them to fierce critique. Much learning, he said, does not teach understanding. Pythagoras, whom he mentions by name, struck him as an impostor. He also knew the Orphic tradition and the mystery cults. He shares with them the language of awakening. Men sleep, the wise man is awake, but reverses its meaning. For Heraclitus, truth is not attained through secret rites, but through grasping the logos that governs all things. And there is one further influence, that of the poetic tradition. His oracular style, his very brief sentences, recall the aphorisms of the 7 sages of Greece and the poetry of Archilochus. Heraclitus does not write like an Ionian philosopher. He writes like a prophet. We have reached the core of Heraclitus's thought. 2 fragments offer us the key to his entire philosophy. The first, which opened his book, runs, "Although this logos holds forever, men prove unable to grasp it, both before they have heard it and after they have heard it for the first time." The second, still more celebrated, declares, "Listening not to me but to the logos, it is wise to agree that all things are one." In these sentences is encoded one of the deepest revolutions of ancient philosophy. What exactly is the logos? The Greek word is untranslatable in its full richness. It means at once word, reason, proportion, account, reckoning. Heraclitus plays on all these senses. The logos is not a doctrine of his, a personal fancy. It is the universal law that governs the cosmos, whether human beings grasp it or not. It holds forever, from all eternity, and everything happens in accordance with it. But human beings do not see it. They live as though asleep, shut up in their private worlds, without awakening to what is common. To grasp the logos is not to accumulate more knowledge. It is not to know more than others. It is to awaken to what is already there, before everyone's eyes, but which only the wise person manages to see. And what does the logos reveal? That all things are one. This assertion, which sounds mystical, has a very precise content. The opposites that ordinary reason separates as incompatible, day and night, life and death, war and peace, hunger and satiety, are not enemies. They are the 2 sides of a single reality. Day is not the opposite of night, but its continuation. Death is not the opposite of life, but its other face. Harmony is not the absence of conflict. On the contrary, it is the tension that holds together what tends to pull apart. Heraclitus expressed it with an unforgettable metaphor. They do not understand how what differs agrees with itself. A back-turning harmony, as in the bow and the lyre. Why do human beings not grasp the logos? Because they seek truth in their private experience, in their opinions, in their dreams. The logos is common, but each person shuts themselves up in their own. It is as though the world spoke a language everyone could understand, yet each insisted on hearing only their own dialect. Heraclitus's philosophy is, for this reason, a call to awaken. It is not a matter of learning something new, but of opening one's eyes to what is already there, the unity of opposites, the invisible harmony, the logos that governs all things. The wise person is not the one who knows many things. It is the one who has awakened. Heraclitus did not merely proclaim that the logos unifies opposites. Like any thinker worthy of the name, he offered reasons. But his reasons are not abstract deductions. They are observations of common experience, the kind anyone can verify if they pause to look. Let us examine the 3 main grounds that articulate his doctrine. The first ground appeals to what we see every day. Life and death are not separate realities, but moments of a single cycle. What is alive now was dead before, and what is dead now will be alive again. The day that dawns is the night that ends. Hunger is the condition of satiety, and satiety the condition of hunger. You cannot have one without the other. They are not enemies that exclude one another, but phases of a single process that need each other. Heraclitus does not deny that opposites are distinct. What he denies is that they are incompatible. Difference is not contradiction, it is succession, complementarity, unity. The second ground is perhaps the most beautiful. Harmony is not the absence of tension, but the equilibrium of opposing forces. Heraclitus illustrated it with two unforgettable metaphors: the bow and the lyre. Both work because their ends pull in opposite directions. The bowstring bends the wood. The lyre strings vibrate between two fixed points. Without that tension, the bow would not loose the arrow, the lyre would not produce music. The fairest harmony is the one born from conflict. What seems like war is, in reality, the condition of all creation. Human beings do not see it because they seek a harmony without tensions, a peace without struggle. But such harmony does not exist. Real harmony is invisible, Heraclitus said, and it is stronger than the visible one. The third ground is the most radical. War is the father of all things, Heraclitus wrote. This is no apology for violence. It is a metaphysical assertion. Everything arises from strife. Without conflict there is no change. Without change there is no life. Without life there is no cosmos. What human beings call peace is only a moment in the cycle, a pause between two tensions. War does not destroy order. It produces it. It is the very law of the logos. Heraclitus is not celebrating chaos. He is saying that order is not the opposite of conflict, but its result. The cosmos is no tranquil garden. It is a battlefield where opposing forces balance one another without canceling out. And that equilibrium is what we call the world. The doctrine of the logos and the unity of opposites was no game of paradoxes. It set in motion consequences that transformed ancient philosophy and anticipated debates that reach into our own day. Let us examine the four main consequences of Heraclitus's thought. The first consequence is logical. The unity of opposites challenges the most fundamental principle of rational thought, the principle of non-contradiction, which Aristotle would enshrine a century later. If opposites can be the same, does not all logic totter? Heraclitus does not propose a new logic, he does not write a treatise on dialectic. But he opens a door no one had opened before, the possibility of thinking beyond rigid identity. The second consequence is metaphysical. For Heraclitus, being is not static. Reality is not a substance that abides beneath change, as the Milesians had believed. Reality is change itself. There is no permanent substrate. The only thing that does not change is the law of change, the logos. Becoming is not an appearance that conceals true being. Becoming is being. The third consequence is anthropological. The doctrine of the logos contains a devastating critique of ordinary human existence. Human beings live asleep, shut up in their private opinions, without access to what is common. The wise person is the one who awakens. But to awaken is not to learn something new. It is to see what is already there, before everyone's eyes, but which most fail to grasp. Philosophy is not, for Heraclitus, a doctrine to be taught. It is a way of awakening. Knowing is not accumulating information. It is opening one's eyes. This idea will have a long lineage. Plato, the Stoics, even Heidegger would acknowledge their debt to this Heraclitean intuition. The fourth consequence is the historical legacy. Few philosophers have had a posterity so rich and so diverse. Plato received from Heraclitus the problem of becoming. If everything changes, how is knowledge possible? The Stoics made the logos their central principle. The reason that governs the cosmos is the same reason that dwells in the human soul. Hegel saw in Heraclitus the forerunner of dialectic, the movement of thought that advances through contradiction. And Nietzsche, in a gesture of admiration rare for him, considered Heraclitus his philosophical ancestor. The first thinker who said yes to becoming, yes to conflict, yes to life as it is, without need of otherworldly consolations. Heraclitus founded no school, but his thought has traveled through the centuries as few have. Interpreting Heraclitus runs up against difficulties that have occupied generations of specialists. The first and most fundamental concerns the logos itself. What exactly is it? A physical law governing the cosmos, a divine principle, the human reason that accesses truth, or all of these at once? The Greek term is deliberately polysemic, and Heraclitus plays on that ambiguity without resolving it. The second question concerns his style. Why does he write so obscurely? Does he conceal his thought to protect it from the profane, or does his manner of writing reflect the nature of reality itself, which is also enigmatic and demands to be deciphered? The third question touches the core of his doctrine. In what precise sense are opposites the same? Does Heraclitus claim they are identical, which would violate the most elementary logic? Or does he rather hold that they transform into one another, as day into night? Or perhaps that they are complementary aspects of a higher unity, like the two sides of a single coin? The question divides specialists and probably has no univocal answer. Finally, there is the problem of the unity of his thought. Is there a philosophical system behind the fragments, or should we read them as loose intuitions, aphorisms without systematic articulation? The fragmentary nature of his work prevents a conclusive answer. The figure of Heraclitus has drawn interpretations so disparate that they almost sketch different philosophers. Hegel, in his Phenomenology of Spirit and his Logic, enshrined him as the first dialectical thinker in history. Contradiction, which for traditional logic was a scandal, became with Heraclitus the engine of thought and reality. Hegel went so far as to say, "There is not a single proposition of Heraclitus that I have not taken up into my logic." At the opposite extreme, Geoffrey Kirk, in his classic 1954 study, took a deliberately cautious stance. In his view, the Heraclitean logos is not a grand metaphysical principle, but simply the proportion, or measure, that governs natural changes. Heraclitus was not a mystic or a prophet. He was a physicist in the Milesian tradition, though more subtle and more profound. Martin Heidegger, in his essays of the 1950s, offered a radically different reading. For Heidegger, Heraclitus is the thinker of being as a presence that conceals itself. The logos does not mean reason, in the modern sense, but gathering, collecting. Human beings fail to grasp the logos because they have forgotten being. They have shut themselves up in beings. Three readings, three Heracliteans: the dialectician, the physicist, and the thinker of being. We have reached the end of this first lesson on Heraclitus of Ephesus. 3 points deserve to be held onto. The first is the discovery of the logos. Against the Milesians, who had sought a material principle, Heraclitus found something different: a law, a structure, a reason that governs the cosmos. This logos holds forever, from all eternity, and everything happens according to it. But human beings do not see it. They live as though asleep, shut up in their private opinions, without access to what is common. Heraclitus's philosophy is, for this reason, a call to awaken. The second point is the harmony of opposites. What ordinary reason separates as incompatible, life and death, day and night, war and peace, is in reality a unity. Opposites do not exclude one another. They complement, they succeed, they need each other. Harmony is not the absence of conflict, but the tension that holds together what tends to pull apart. Like the bow that looses the arrow. Like the lyre that produces music. War is the father of all things, but that war does not destroy the cosmos. It produces it. The third point is that philosophy, for Heraclitus, is not a doctrine to be learned. It is an awakening. It is not a matter of accumulating knowledge, but of opening one's eyes to what is already there, before everyone, yet which only the wise manage to see. That is why Heraclitus did not write systematic treatises, but sentences that jolt, that unsettle, that compel thought. Let us close with this thought. Heraclitus did not write to lull. He wrote to awaken, and 25 centuries later, his fragments are still a jolt. For those wishing to pursue Heraclitus further, several works are indispensable. The standard critical edition of the fragments remains Deals and Kranz's Presocratic Fragments, which collects all the surviving fragments in their original language. As for secondary literature, Geoffrey Kirk's Heraclitus, The Cosmic Fragments of 1954 remains essential reading. The interpretation that presents Heraclitus as a physicist in the Milesian tradition. At the opposite pole, Hegel's lectures on the history of philosophy offer the dialectical reading that enshrined Heraclitus as a forerunner of German idealism. And Martin Heidegger's essays, Logos and Aletheia, collected in early Greek thinking, propose a radically different reading. Heraclitus as the thinker of being. In our next lesson we shall complete our study of Heraclitus by turning to the second dimension of his thought. Fire as a material principle, universal becoming, and his conception of the soul. From logos to fire, from the harmony of opposites to the flux of all things. We hope you will join us there. Thank you for your attention. Until next time.